Right. Hello. Hello, everyone. So this is a breakout session, which is exciting, and it means it affords me the opportunity to be even less formal than previously. So the idea is to have a discussion here. We've spared you Slido and any other Miro board or any other IT stuff, mainly because I'm incompetent with it. But what it does mean is that we would like discussion, make points, give us examples of things we're doing, you're doing, sorry, we'll give you examples of what we're doing. And yes, do ask questions, maybe throughout the process. So we've talked a lot about advice already. I'll bring you back to what Aisling talked about earlier. So we've got three hubs which are funded by Skipton, and the idea with these hubs is obviously to help the people in the communities and in the locality, but also, as is the case with a lot of what NEA does, is to capture the learning and influence what happens next. So as well as us observing what works best, we speak to people, speak to them about their experiences pre and post having the measures installed. So that is also the aim of this session, is to get your points of view. As we talked about, I think there is a real opportunity to influence what the Warm Homes Agency does, and therefore, the learnings we capture from this will be used to influence the way DESNES moves forward. So I'll let everyone sit down. Kenneth, are you the last, do you think? You get excused for being the most smartly dressed.
There are two people downstairs getting conflicting information.
Well, this is the problem with Retrofit as well. You get lots of conflicting information.
Theme of the day.
And that's why you need trusted advice. So that's where we'll start. So without further me babbling, I'll introduce our first speaker, who's Lorenza from Carbon Co-op.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've just arrived this morning, so lots of new faces. I lead the Energy Commons team. We've got 3 teams at Carbon Co-op. We are a community benefit society, and we are a community energy organization, and we founded between 2010 and 2011, so we've been around for about 15 years. I'm one of the co-founders as well, and we're based in Greater Manchester, and that's where we work most area geographically, but we've also worked in West Yorkshire. So we've been doing some really interesting work with regards to retrofit and retrofit challenges, and obviously within the Calder Valley, and very different typologies as well from our Manchester, usually Victorian streets. That's what we're most dealing with. In terms of retrofit, the way that we started was back in 2010 or even earlier. An awareness already back then that retrofit was really hard, especially when you were doing it on your own. As you were saying, not knowing where to find information and what to try, and to have a level of confidence that you weren't going to do something terrible as well. And so the idea that, hi everybody, come, no, it's fine. So yeah, the idea of supporting each other, and so that energy advice, where could find trustworthy sources, but also breaking down the myths around retrofit and sharing that knowledge, that kind of socializing the retrofit problem has always been a very big thing for us as well. And we were just talking earlier, compared to yourselves, in that 15 years, we've certainly seen a lot changing, but also not changing so much, that energy advice, and how can communities really reach energy advice that responds to them, that is person-centered. And it was really interesting to hear the panels earlier that you chaired as well. So is that?
Can I ask what your reflections are on what the sort of selling points are, and noting obviously carbon co-op.
Yes.
And, we had consensus around carbon, or at least at the political level, until, well, pretty much a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. That's now really fractured.
Yes,
The media is stoking that. So has that influenced your thinking into the future yet?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, and it was again been discussed earlier, ultimately when we do retrofit well, when we have good homes to live in, it impacts our life, So in a way, being able to reduce carbon is a benefit actually to the fact that we're trying to do something that makes us live healthier, warmer homes. And that is a priority for householders of all backgrounds, whether you're looking at the pioneers, the able to pay, to the vulnerable customers, to be in a home that, Sarah was saying earlier, that you feel safe and secure and healthy for yourself and your occupants. So, but I think that what is really interesting is that forefronting of the conversation still underpins the fact that it is also really valuable that we're helping the environment, we're helping ourselves, and we're helping the future generations. Mm-hmm. I think that was really, really interesting in the energy advice is how much conversations are also around the children of a family or residents of a community and young people and young jobs. So it's very holistic, actually. It feels like you can start with one kind of topic conversation, but actually you end up talking about everything very holistically.
And so do you have sort of set approaches? So we approach, the classic customer segmentation. Do you say, right, this is what we're going to say to this type of person, and then adapt it, or how have you developed that over time?
I think that what the approach is actually quite universal, which is the idea that we can share knowledge and we can cross-reference knowledge as well. So whether you're a pioneer, or you own your own home, or you're a private rental, your personal lived experience can support each other. So this idea that we're going to put each of us in a box doesn't quite work, because ultimately, as we're saying, we all want to live in a comfortable and healthy home. And at the base of it, I would say that everyone that we've ever spoken to in 15 years, everyone is concerned about the environment as well. It's absolutely not true that, and especially there is a myth that I find personally difficult, that vulnerable customers are just worried about paying the bills or other things, which is really obviously a priority, but they really, really care about the environment as well, So in that way, it's universal. What we have learned is to really think about how we design our advice service. This idea we were talked earlier of not one size fits all. Depending on audiences, we're really understanding how to deliver that advice, and we really invest in trying to co-design or co-understand what advice is tailored, to different householders. So, for example, we are also looking at language, like we do not talk about hard to reach customers. We don't even use the word customers. We're all householders in one way or another, and we talk about underrepresented or underserved or both. Because very often the idea is that we have a very one-size-fits-all advice. So you might be a different variety of characteristics, when you're not receiving that advice. So you might be underserved, and that means lots of different things.
And I'm interested, what, if you were to distill it down to one or two things, what are the things that have made your job, Carbon Co-op's job, difficult?
One or two things. Okay.
Oh, we can go further. You can name.
Can open up to the floor.
But and therefore, I suppose on the sort of positive of that, what do you think? How can those be resolved, and what can we do now in the next sort of year or so as things are implemented in the Warm Homes Plan?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was obviously in the room earlier with the panel and didn't manage to get a question in, but the question I wanted to ask, and it's definitely something we've come across as a challenge, and I wouldn't be surprised if this chimes with many of us, is the cohesive approach and legacy of the funding that does come out of government. Like if you're lucky, you get a 2-year program, gold dust is 3, and the majority 9 to 12 months, and to create that system change and that policy implementation, that really works, isn't it? When it's so very often short term, and you get to the end of a project and you've done something fantastic and you've engaged with the local authorities and community leads and householders through communities, and then you're always like chasing the next thing, and I really would love to see that kind of cohesiveness changing. We're lucky that we are always in contact with DESNES as well, so we're kind of grassroots, but also do go and reach out to policymakers. We advocate very strongly, but that kind of taking on board, I think, our evaluations and our learning and passing it on and getting that policy to work robustly, that has always been a challenge, and it would be great too, because I think if that changes, then I think all of our work will change with it, for the better, and for the householders that we're obviously working with, and that is our commitment to it.
And there have been calls over the years, again knowing this from being in government, of government needing to lead comms campaigns. What's your view on that?
I think what government really does is providing that belief and commitment behind it, which is what you were saying earlier is a real problem in the last year that has been so fragmented, and it's felt like we've been pulled from pillar to post. I hope I'm not out of terms, and I don't know if you have experienced the same, but with local authorities, we work with local authorities a lot, and there's a real worry about even language. We're being told to help not to frame everything around net zero, but actually to talk about the core benefits. Things like that can really erode it. So comms from that point of view is really important. But I think understanding who the householders are and what speaks to them, then that's very much like a very local rooted solution. And our experience is actually hyper local. Like we can work in the same ward or city in Manchester. We're Manchester based, the majority. If you just change boundary between ward to ward, not even a mile, the communities and the characteristics of the communities are so unique that if you've done something successful in ward X and you're moving 1 mile, and if you just say, oh, work there, it'll work again, it really will not. So you have to really understand the communities you're working with, which is why community leads, anchor organizations, local charitable organizations are really trusted partners to understand how can we connect with householders in order to help them the most.
Yeah. Has anyone got any questions at this point? Otherwise, I'll bring in Lisa. Great. So for those of you who think Isle of Wight is just a holiday idyll or someone to go on a music festival, I was surprised to hear that it's got actually some social issues. That when I first spoke to Lisa, who's probably also travelled the furthest out of anyone at this conference, having to get a boat as well as multiple trains. So yes, Lisa, please tell us about your work.
Well, I'm the only one who's going to bore you with PowerPoint today, so please forgive me. If it works. 2 seconds, sorry, No, nothing's moving yet. Oh, no. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm Lisa Beaney, Managing Director of Green Isle of Wight. So we're a community interest company, funny enough, based on the Isle of Wight. And we provide high-quality energy advice and home energy visits to people. And our kind of tagline is that we aim to make people's homes warmer and cheaper to heat. You notice we're going away from net zero and carbon loss because it looks like we're going to end up with a reform council in May. So we have a very low efficiency level of our existing housing stock. You can see the green bits are good and everything else is bad, and that's primarily because most of it is pre-1945. In a good way, in the Second World War, the Isle of Wight didn't get bombed. But the result of that means that we still have all of our old housing stock. So as an island, we're about 5 miles south of Portsmouth. We're one of the sunniest places in the country. We've got beautiful beaches. Anyone who's into surfing, come along and see us. But we do have this large proportion of pre-1900 properties. We also have several other problems. So we have an ageing population. So over 35% of our population is over 65, because it's a lovely place to live. People come here to retire, and that doesn't always help. We've got lower than average household incomes. We have a large farming community and a large hospitality industry, and neither of those are known for being very well paid. We also have low literacy levels. Last year, nearly 26% of our secondary school pupils were excluded at one point or another. I mean, that is massive, and that is a whole problem in its own right. And we also have very inefficient housing stock. So all of this mixed together gives us some quite, well, I'd say unique problems, but I'm sure they're mirrored in other communities around the country. But it does mean that we are a brilliant location to test technology and energy efficiency measures. So we were lucky enough to run one of DESNZ's local energy advice demonstrator projects, which was over about 18 months, testing a variety of solutions that we could use to give energy advice. Part of it is we use fairer warmth. This means that we have a given platform that provides consistent advice. We have a number of trained energy champions within the community who are volunteers. We've been busy training parish councillors. So hopefully, every time somebody bumps into somebody, whether it's in a pub, whether it's at a coffee morning, there is somebody they can talk to who has a good background knowledge of what's true and what isn't. So this, if we can move on one slide. This provides customised things that people can do within their own home. We try not to use the word retrofit because most people we talk to don't know what it means. So we say it's doing things to your house after it's been built, or home improvements. And that way people go, oh yeah, I know what home improvements are. But people put in some of their own details and their property, and it matches up what grants they might be eligible to and what other help might be there. We also use thermal imaging. So on our home visits, we will look at people's heating with a thermal imaging camera, because just fixing radiators that need bleeding or balancing can save people money, along with turning down the flow temperature on the boiler. And if you can do things like that immediately for people while you're there, they start to trust what you say because you've come in and you've done something and it saved them money. One of the other things that it financed, the LEAD scheme, was a thermal aerial survey. So we had Kestrix come in and fly their drones over an area on the island that happens to be in the IMD 1 and 2 bands, and surveyed about 1,200 properties over 2 days. And what this gives us, as you can see, is a thermal picture of every single property. So we can see which of those are leaking the heat through their roofs and might need loft insulation. We can see the ones that have thermally inefficient windows. So we can then approach the households and say, look, we know you're in IMD 1 and 2. We know your home is an EPC, D, E, F, G, or maybe no EPC. We know there are these grants available. Let's help you apply for it, and let's help remedy the problems that your home has. But none of this works without community engagement. So a large part of what we do is connecting with people. So we will go around the community, we will sit in church halls, we'll go to the warm spaces, the food banks, we'll work with just about any organisation that's happy to have us come along, and we'll talk to people. But it's no good just going once. You have to build a level of trust. And you only do that by having the same face in the same place month after month. So the first month, nobody talks to you. Well, they don't, do they? The second month, they'll come and sit and chat. And the third month, you'll start to hear their problems and you can work out how you can help. And then when we know how we can support, we can look at what we can do practically to help, whether that's a home visit, whether that's just energy advice where we are. But all of this technology is brilliant, but we still have people that are digitally excluded. And again, that's why the outreach is so important, because we can go along and we can go through the same system on Fairer Warmth that somebody could log online and do and provide consistent advice, because we want to make sure that everybody that's providing advice on our behalf is providing the same advice in the same way, and that we're logging details of everyone we talk to, because I'm sure everyone here knows funders like reports. And we all have to be able to quantify what we do, and using a consistent system enables us to do that. And after a while, people do invite you into their homes. And when you go into somebody's home, you get the true picture of what's happening. And we can sit down with them and we'll talk through their unique problems. And everybody is different. You could have a row of terraced houses, but everybody will live in their homes in slightly different ways. And our help is free to everyone. We have a variety of different funders that fund different schemes, but initially our advice is free to literally everyone. It doesn't matter if you are a multi-millionaire who wants to know how to run his hot tub a bit cheaper and doesn't like paying £700 a month for his electricity, or if you're struggling with fuel debt, because good quality advice needs to be available to everyone. And then when we come onto it, we can use the funding that we get paid by some of the companies that do the work for the rich people to fund the work that we do for the people that can't afford it. But what do we find? We find that there is a fear of change and new technology. So a lot of the people that we see that are eligible for grant funding are scared of having the work done because they don't know what's involved. They don't know what can be done. They think, I've always lived like this, I've always had my coal fire, therefore coal fires are the way forward. And they doubt the efficiency of new systems and how will that impact their bills, because Fred's uncle's dog's cousin down the pub last week said that heat pumps were so expensive to run they'd never be able to afford to turn it on. So we have all of this to overcome, and we can only do that by talking to people. So these are all real people, real customers, where we have managed to help them. So this chap here, the only things he needed was better ventilation in his flat. And that would help get rid of the damp, the condensation, and the mould. So just by helping him get some trickle vents fitted and some extractor fans in his kitchen and bathroom made a huge difference to him in his home. And as you can see, he said the air just feels fresher. It didn't feel cold, and he now doesn't have problems with the condensation. But not all homes are the same. This is Derek, and when we first went to see him, we were the first people who'd actually been in his home all year, and this was September time. And that log burner in the corner was his only form of heating. And he's in his 80s and was still chopping the wood by hand. You may think this is unusual, but on the Isle of Wight it isn't. we're meeting lots of people like Derek that are still feeding log burners, and that's their only form of heating. And in your 80s, actually, chopping wood becomes hard work. So we did our normal home energy visit. We got him things like the electric heated throw to help him immediately. But we also helped him apply for Hug 2 grant that meant he could have things like solar panels and a heat pump installed. And we worked with him and the installer so that he knew what to expect, so he knew the level of disruption that he would have in his home, because with no pipe work for radiators, all that pipe work has to be put in place. You're going to need a new hot water cylinder. That's got to go somewhere. By building up that level of trust and putting realistic expectations in place, when it came to the installation, it wasn't a surprise or a shock, that he knew what to expect. And this is Derek afterwards, with his nice new shiny heat pump. And as he said to us, he's not sure he could have gone through another winter chopping up the wood. But our help doesn't stop there, because lots of people then are scared of the bills that they're going to get, especially if you've never had central heating before. How do you know what it's going to cost? And when you're living on a very low income, sometimes the fear of turning it on for the fear of the bills actually stops people using the systems that the grant funding's paid for. So we're able to provide energy vouchers that will cover the cost of the first month of his heating, so he could put his heating on and actually, with a heat pump, know that it works best if you run it for a long time at a slightly lower temperature, and that's how it's going to be more efficient. And the energy it draws for that first hour or so when it fires up, it's not going to run at that rate for the entire time it's running. It gives people confidence in the way that it works and helps them over that initial, I call it an anxiety gap, of how this heating will work. We've also recently been back to see Derek again, just to make sure he's comfortable with it. We make sure people are on the right tariff, because how does he know which of the numerous tariffs to go on? If he's not online anyway, saying, oh, just go to a comparison site, if you don't know the questions to ask, how do you know the answers? So we will help people find the best tariff for them. We will program people's heating systems for them for that tariff, because there's lots of heat pump tariffs where you'll get a cheaper rate for some hours in the day. And we'll make sure he understood how it works and how it controls it. And we keep going back until people are comfortable and happy. And it's this ongoing support from a trusted person that is so important. This is Martin. He had a heat pump and solar, and he was amazed that with his solar going, you can see his quote, his heating cost him 3p for a day in the middle of December. And he'd had old-fashioned night storage heaters before that seemed to cost him a small fortune to run, and by lunchtime were cold, because nobody had actually explained to him how to use them properly to start with. But he's over-halved his energy bill by moving to a heat pump. And these things are possible. We just have to get the trust within the communities from the people who need the help. And that's, I think, where energy advice organisations come in, and having properly qualified staff to go and give proper advice. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I think that a lot of that resonates with the work we've done at the hubs. And just a warning, Dan, I might bring you in if we've got a bit of time about your recent experiences. But has anyone got their own tales to tell or questions at this point?
Hi, I just have a question. So I'm not far from you. I'm in West Sussex. Hello. So in West Sussex, we've also got quite an ageing population. People come there for the same reason, to retire. But one thing we ask...
Sorry, I live in West Sussex.
You
That's
do, you're in
rude.
Worthing, right? But we have a lot of static caravans and people living on holiday sites who shouldn't be. Is that something that can be helped through retrofitting, or is it specifically just for a stereotypical house?
I think the people living in holiday parks, again, it's an issue that we have. And there are multiple different problems there. And the actual ownership structure of that and what the holiday park will allow them to do is normally the biggest issue. There are schemes that cover park homes, and the Warm Homes Local Grant is a grant scheme that will cover park homes. What can practically be done is tricky because the construction of them is normally not the best in the world, but more insulation is always possible. Whether they would be suitable for heat pumps or not, I'm not sure. Potentially, but you've got space outside, ownership of land. And we've had some where we've been talking to the park owners about the potential for fitting solar panels on the top, because they're all flat roofed, like little chalet bungalows, single skin brick. They would benefit so much from even battery and solar. And I think that could be a good answer for them. Battery on its own without solar, people can still then benefit from the cheap energy that you can get overnight and then use that during the day. But yeah, park homes are a problem, and the ownership of them even more so.
Thank you.
So just I have to say something on park homes, because for one period of my life, which wasn't necessarily the happiest, I was the government's lead on park home retrofit policy. And it's, 15 years ago, you couldn't even get an EPC for a park home because they're not covered by building regs. They're products. They're products that are supposed to last 25 years, even though evidence very clearly suggests they last longer. But that then presents an issue for government, because you have business cases where you have to say what's the value for money of treating one of these things. And if you're doing it on the basis that, that thing is only going to last for another couple of years, we're not going to put a skin round it, which is effectively you just have to envelope the whole thing. There has been sort of progress over the years, but as I say, it's quite difficult to make it cost effective. I think in terms of heat pumps, they're small. In fact, there are sort of standards that they have to fit within to be considered a park home. But an air-to-air heat pump, for example, might be quite a suitable technology for that. The other issue you have is the supply, because often it comes via the park site owner, and it's a sort of subcontract to the individual. So that's your problem. Sorry.
Can I also just add to that? There's the definition of a park home and a lodge, which are temporary, which is not the same thing. Sorry, just going to add to that. There is a difference between a park home and a holiday home or a lodge. They're built to different standards and come under different regulations in terms of the construction and the insulation and upgrades and retrofit of a holiday home versus a park home are different. Park homes are designed to be lived in all year round. Holiday homes are not. So therefore, the holiday home insulation is a big problem for people that want to live in them full time. And it's something I don't think anyone's really got to grips with properly. But I'm just throwing that out there.
No, it's a very valid point. And actually, there isn't even great evidence. I mean, I remember we ran a call for evidence a long time ago just to try and establish how many of these homes there were, but it's very difficult to get a handle on. So just starting from the point of view of having the right data is a problem. So there were a few hands up. Wow, suddenly have lots of hands up. Get your steps in today, Nick.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you. So in the Warm Homes Plan, there's this big push to solar and batteries and heat pumps and stuff. So my concern is about the legacy of the kind of maintenance, and I'm just kind of feeling a bit cautious that we could be setting ourselves up for a whole lot of new problems. I'm just thinking, you know, animals chewing through wires, sort of building nests, making a fire hazard, all of that type of thing. And I've not heard that discussed at all. And so I was interested in Lorenza talking about the short-term government funding and the sort of legacy concerns. And then Lisa saying that you kept going back and supporting people where you'd fitted equipment. So it's just sort of that bit of dichotomy and any discussion to put my fears at rest.
Definitely. It's a really, really good question, actually. And chimed in with what you were saying about that support of the after. The work that we do a lot is to support people to have that very holistic understanding of what it means to look after your home. So we always recommend everyone, no matter background, situation at home, etc., to really look after the maintenance of the home first before even tackling any retrofit, you know, whether it's your fabric approach or your technology. So I think that there is a real importance in that energy advice that actually is about supporting people to have that very holistic understanding of a home. We always say that a home is a system. Generally, there is also, unfortunately, I think, has been a legacy of an idea that when you do something to your home, it becomes maintenance-free. You know, we've come across for many, many years this idea that if you have your PVC windows, you never have to touch them ever again, you know, and that kind of thing also needs to be kind of redirected in that way. We've just completed another project called Socialising Flexibility, again, Manchester-based. We worked with a social housing tenant on the housing stock of Manchester City Council. And the whole project was actually about going back to tenants who had received technologies and understand if the handover had been done correctly, if the technology had been explained, you know, what you were saying earlier, long and slow, as we say, you know, for a heat pump, for example. And actually we created resources, like really accessible resources in terms of plain English and lots of other ways in order to make people feel more confident about understanding what that maintenance even looks like and then how to report the problem and things like that. So I think that there is many different components. And I chime with you, you know, like in the sense of our concern that, I think, was it you or Sarah earlier talking about how we report and how, you know, there's many departments, and I personally always have a bit of a heart attack when I get KPIs under my eyes because, you know, we're always talking about what are we reporting on those KPIs. You know, I think Sarah said, you know, what matters. And it's very much about that kind of point of install, point of being able to say, yes, there is X amount of carbon reduction and energy efficiency, but actually what happens before is just important as what happens, what happens after is just as important what happens before.
I was going to say, you need a good supply chain, and you need the installers to understand the length of warranty on the products, and you need the product suppliers to actually honour those warranties. But it's having a good supply chain makes a difference, and that's something on the island we've struggled with, because under the grant-funded schemes, there's been no PAS qualified companies, so we've had everybody come over from the mainland to do the installations. Part of the problem there is for any snagging, they don't want to send a team back just to do that little bit of snagging. So making sure it's done properly first time, and then upskilling the old gas engineers on the island, get them retrained to service heat pumps, and for the electricians to be competent to work on batteries and solar panels is really important, because when the weather's really bad, the ferries don't run. So that has a whole load of problems. But you're right, making sure we have a good supply chain in place and that installer network in place, because there will be problems. I'm sure everybody here who's had gas central heating has had a problem with it at some time or another. It's just making sure you've got the right people in place to deal with that.
It's. I mean, there are risks with a shift away from insulation, your inverter failing, or you not even perhaps noticing that your battery's disconnected. So some of our innovation work that we've done within NEA, that was a key finding, is people need to understand what to monitor, how to monitor that these things are working properly. Also, if you're in a more remote area, I suppose the servicing could cost a lot. I remember I got a heat pump 5 years ago. Now, you perhaps don't need to service them as much, or there are no real requirements in the same way as for gas boilers, I suppose, to have that regular maintenance for safety reasons. But when I first went to have it serviced, I was quoted £250. And do people expect that cost? So there is that. But in terms of, there have been issues with house maintenance overall with insulation, and a lot of the debates that have happened over the years about, guarantees being worthless have been on the basis of the guarantee provider saying, well, actually, you have not maintained your property. And I think that it's a difficult problem, because guarantees are for 25 years, but that is for insulation. I mean, so for cavity wall insulation, that is a long time. If you either you do something unaware of the fact that it could invalidate your guarantee, you drill into your home for whatever reason, into your wall, that could invalidate it. But equally, you've just got to, if you see cracks, if there's problems with the mortar, you don't do anything about that. Again, you could have water ingress, you've got an issue, but your guarantee's void. So actually, there is a question mark for me: are 25-year guarantees even sort of viable for insulation? Because especially, as I say, if you haven't got a lot of money for maintenance, it's quite easy to invalidate them.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm from Citizens UK. We work with community groups on the ground. I'm really encouraged by all the talk about what the householder needs. A lot of what we come across is kind of basic decency. Decency. Mm-hmm. So kind of, I guess the thing that hasn't been mentioned here is the decent home standard. Yes. And when you're taking this really, we know that a lot of the homes that will be facing fuel poverty will have hazards, and a lot of things that don't necessarily give you any carbon reduction benefits, leaks, mushrooms growing, all that kind of thing. And just be interested in your experience about how you can you tackle that, or how do you go about that, even though it's sort of a remit of probably not retrofit, but still a massive impact on the health and particularly mental health of those householders.
Yes, definitely. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I was going to say, we quite often go into homes like that, and we will work with other advice agencies and support agencies to see what help we can get for somebody. We provide as much practical help as we can, so if we can supply dehumidifiers, if we can find very local charities that will help people clear their gutters. There is help available for people who are hoarders to help them clear their homes, and it does make a difference. But there is a limit to how much help we can provide, because we're not necessarily qualified to do that. But sometimes you need that help in place before anything we can do can actually make that difference. So yes, we will help wherever we can, but unfortunately it's limited, and unfortunately there's very little funding for it.
Well, from our point of view, so we were another lead local area energy administrator, demonstrator that you had. Yeah, we did a project called Energize Manchester within Manchester, and we worked across different partners. So we partnered with an anchor agency called Care and Repair, which there are across the country. Manchester has Manchester Care and Repair. They support vulnerable customers, especially when they're referred from coming out of hospital or GP referrals, for example. And then we also worked with the local NHS trust, and they have a program in place called Neighbourhood Health Champions. And they're very, again, quite holistic in how they support community members, cancer screening, blood pressure, and living well in the home. And I think the thing that was really interesting was the fact that we offered an opportunity for those conversations to happen in the first place. So we had a lot of, we call them light touch. They're meant to be more like pop-up. So as you were saying, you sit in a library or cafe or a space, and people just get to know you, and they know that they can trust you, and you're not trying to sell them anything. And after a bit, we had people coming up with their photographs of their home, showing us exactly that, multi-generational households, that very common where we work. Really interestingly, we found that the worst scenarios of that was with private rental sector, and especially where we worked was very diverse communities where English wasn't their first language, and therefore the problem were kept home because they didn't know who to ask. The language was a barrier, and there was a lot of cultural around it. And just being able to have a conversation. So again, obviously we're not frontline workers, but I think that that's where the change can happen, is that coordinated partnership work. So public health has really taught us a lot in how to approach energy advice, and trying to work with different partners that can answer different elements of that. It's been really an eye-opener. So for us, that project was really innovative because we understood that we all bring something really unique and really valuable. The other thing that we did within that project is that through the Neighbourhood Health Champions, we train the champions, and as we train the champions around how to hold good energy conversations, because they're literally university students or a community lead, not an energy advisor, but they were holding good energy conversations, and we trained them, and then the local GM legal aid team trained them to have good energy conversations around rights as tenants compared to landlords, because very often people are told that if you're having damp and mold in your problem is your fault because you're drying your clothes indoor, because you're cooking without opening windows. And actually a lot of it is because the landlord hasn't been doing the upkeep of the maintenance of the home, or the two things are connected, And that was also, it didn't solve everything, but it was a really interesting model to test and see that people were really responsive to that. And then when they were joining the dots, I think that's the other thing that we don't do enough in our sector, and maybe going back to that government funding and cohesion is the joining the dots element, is that when we do things like that, then change can really happen, because with those good conversations, we had heard after that some of those tenants were able to receive that kind of energy understanding. Why does damp happen? What causes it? Okay, well, I haven't opened the window because I've cooked a lot, but also the gutters are blocked, and so there is water ingress. Oh, actually, it's not my fault, and I've been told that I need to be evicted, but maybe I don't have to be evicted because it's my fault. And so they went to the legal aid. And do you see what I mean? So it became like a system thinking, and not just, it's your problem. That's the other thing I was saying earlier. We really talk about, we socialize the problem, retrofit or non-retrofit, and we try to co-design those solutions, because it shouldn't be about your problem, my problem, and we're like isolated. If we collectively and the partnership working, I think that that's really valuable. So I would love to see kind of funding programs that really bring that partnerships working solidly. So,
it's a difficult issue when you just getting to the retrofit. There's lots of barriers.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to just bring in Dan, who works at our Oldham hub, because we had a case recently that bears similarities to Derek's story. Nick, if we could, and this is a sort of really tragic example of someone who, well, you tell the.
Well, I think I'm talking. We've had a few. I think a lot of the work we do in our hub is similar to what you're doing, really, but we're finding that these people need a lot of wraparound support. So it's about connecting other services in, you know, and doing the home visits, you see what issues are visible, you know, where kind of other issues might be hidden. A lot of problems with poverty is that it can be easily hidden, it's well hidden, but when it's so evident in a home that you go to the home and you're aware of some of the other issues. I think one of those people that we met was at an Age UK event, so we're out in the community trying to meet people. Is this
the guy who hadn't had anyone in his house?
Yeah, that's right. So he came to an event. It was kind of like a warm space for people to come and have a cup of tea, and slowly got talking to him, and he slowly opened up, and it turned out that, yeah, he hadn't had anyone in his home for over 10 years. And where some of these people, the council might be aware of them through social services, he kind of slipped through the gap, really, you know. So we were able to do a home visit. He had an issue with hoarding. He'd also been targeted by local kids, so nearly all his windows had been smashed. And so he was kind of living in fear. But we were able to kind of go in and then start that conversation with the council and see how else we can help him, you know. And then, yeah, we're in the process of getting him central heating because he'd been using electric heaters only. And yeah, just kind of by being able to kind of have those conversations with the council and other service providers to try and like build a case really where people can kind of start to offer that support. But yeah.
Yeah, and Dan took some pictures in the home, and it's one of those, as I said earlier, you think it is startling. The hoarding was enormous. You know, you've got damp and mould, and where do you start? And actually, that's one of the things I wanted to mention. You mentioned the vouchers, getting over the anxiety, but also a key thing for NEAs, we deal with people in crisis, whether it be over the phone or in this type of scenario, and it is a big leap to say, oh, you can't afford to eat. I know, a heat pump is what you need, you know. So you may be, you need to provide some immediate help. Yeah. Dehumidifiers if there's a real issue. Vouchers. So we're through our hubs going to use e-vouchers, one of our sponsors, to provide that immediate help, and then that's the route in. But this is difficult, again, having been on the side of government. Your job there is to design a retrofit policy. But you know, dealing with that gentleman or Derek, yes. It doesn't work as a retrofit policy. But so then I suppose it's how. Does central government even need to solve that problem, or is that is it reliant on local government and third organisations to connect charities and CICs together? I don't really know what the solution is.
I was going to say, one thing we do, we're able to use money that we have from the Household Support Fund. So we can provide warm duvets for people, thermal socks and slippers, all sorts of other stuff. So when we go and do a home visit, there's the immediate help. So it's pulling in all different strands of funding from all different places. So it's not just retrofit. Retrofit might be the ideal outcome for some people. It might not be for others. But it's how can we best help that person on that day?
Yeah, and also, on the back of that is recognizing that there is different time scale for people. Like that project I was talking about, fellow lead project. We had energy champions who were homeowners really ready to hit the road running, if you want to call it like that, on their retrofit. And they worked with our partner with very, very in-depth retrofit knowledge. And then they got like an assessment, and then they shared that assessment with their neighbours. They had like a retrofit party, as we call them. And then at the very, at the other end of the arc of a program, we had workshops, like hands-on practical workshops, showing people how to use draft-proofing tapes, how to, we had whole conversations around moving furniture in your home to try and be more comfortable. So it's understanding that yeah, it's a much broader spectrum, but also the timescale is so different. I think on your question or your reflection on is it better for local authority and localise, our answer would be yes, definitely. I don't know if there's anyone from local authorities here. Fantastic. We work a lot with local authorities. The work that I lead is very much about that kind of like engagement, forefronting. We find that district officers, neighbourhood officers within the councils are incredibly committed to their communities and they want to do the right thing. They understand where the needs are. They work with those anchor organisations. They are also lacking resources, you know, to be able to do this work well. So we're talking about doing big policies and big changes, but how do we enable like local authorities also to then work back with us? And yeah, so it's that kind of ecosystem, you know, it's that ecosystem that we really need to understand at local level, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Colin Wight from Newcastle Council. So from a council point of view, and I think the services you provide are brilliant, and I think it's those contact points for vulnerable households. Over the years, we've all been digitisation, you know, and the actual physical contact with residents in any shape or form has got less and less. So you don't come across these people, and nobody knows about them. The example of the gentleman hadn't seen him for years because nobody's been knocked on his door. Utility companies don't go and read meters any longer.
Yes.
So people don't spot these and they're able to refer them on. And that's what we're missing, really.
Yeah.
And the services that we do provide through these schemes are sort of potted elsewhere and they do brilliant things. But we should be doing this in a much wider scale. And again, it's that resource issue.
Yeah, definitely.
And local authorities do brilliant jobs with limited amount of resources, and there's people that are really dedicated in there, but we're always fighting for resources, and it's revenue, isn't it? It's about people and getting them out there on the street.
Yeah. I just want to quote Sarah again earlier. No, I'm not Sarah's fan, but I thought what she said was really good. You know what?
It's fine to be Sarah.
Okay, I'm going to be a Sarah's fan. When she said at the end, "Small is beautiful," you know, like. I'm sure we're all the same, that we get told up to scale up and replicate. Isn't that like those are the buzzwords at the moment, right? And so these ideas that you find a model, you know, you find advice, you do a project that is innovative, and then it's like, how do you roll it out and replicate and scale up? But again, actually the understanding that doing well, you know, the smaller components together can give you that bigger picture. I think that's something that is underrated. I mean, Dan, you work at the Oldham Hub, and we have a connection there because the Oldham Hub came from a collaboration, I would say, isn't it, with Carbon Corp. So we've been working in Oldham for 5 years, and we work with the community that the hub is based at. And the Millennium Centre is a community hub, a community heart, where people go to, as everybody was saying earlier, for struggling to pay the bills or the food bank or things like that. And they really recognise that there could be a point of that energy advice and trusted and not being judgmental. That was the biggest thing we learned. Something else, I think, we were talking about decency. You know, that when you don't live in a decent home, you feel really ashamed as well as all the problems that you're suffering. So sometimes you don't reach out to ask for help because you feel like of that judgment coming back. And I think that what you are doing now at the Hub is fantastic because it's that kind of joined up thinking, you know, and I can see the amazing work you're doing there because of doing what you were saying, joining up and making sure there is that. Yeah.
It's joining up and it's building trust within the community. And without that trust, nobody will invite you into their home. And without that, you're not necessarily in the best place to help them. But it's building trust. And going back to something you were saying earlier, the funding cycles that we have, where no sooner than you've started one project, you are having to start applying for money for the next, just to keep going all the time. It would be lovely to have a definite, wouldn't 5 years funding be amazing?
Yes, please.
You know, who would turn that down? As you say, even 2 years is good, but a lot of that funding is a lot shorter term than that. So you can't really kind of gear up some of the projects the way that you may necessarily like to because you don't have that certainty of funding moving forward. So I would love the Warm Homes Plan to properly fund energy advice on a local level.
Yes, not a national just website.
I'm going to come for more questions in a moment. Just a reflection on these funding cycles. And again, I don't want to get into the detail of or the arguments about eco being cut, but we are seeing, a potential impact on the trust even we have, because we had lined up people to have work done. The installers lost the funding, so we led them down that path, perhaps over many conversations, built up the trust. Actually, now we can't get the work done, and they're almost not back to square one, but further back, because they've been let down by having had that relationship developed.
I was going to say, on the Isle of Wight, up until recently for Eco4 Flex, we only had one approved installer, and they were based in Sheffield. Wow. So we worked hard with the council to get them to change their onboarding procedures so that more installers could apply. I personally went and visited a lot of the local installers to persuade them to sign up for this. That was all just coming along, being in place, and then the budget happens. So, incredibly frustrating.
Can I just add a quick one on that? Absolutely. I mean, within Carbon Cop, we've been critical of eco for a long time in terms of that kind of quality assurance and being able to sign things off and, going back and things. But I think I would agree with you, and it takes so much longer to build back that trust, like you get going and when it's pushed back. So, and those are most impacted are those vulnerable communities as well. So when you're talking about earlier about that kind of government comms or communication, perhaps that would be a really important aspect to figure out how do we acknowledge that mistakes were made, and I can understand going forward that to try and fix it probably would have been far harder than stop it, but how do we avoid the runaway of that loss of trust before something else can be put in? And it goes back to your supply chain point. Yeah. How do we support the supply chain that did invest? And there were many, many good people in there. Again, the system was not as robust, was not robust. But how do we, that's the other thing, that's the feedback we receive from the supply chain across all elements of the energy efficiency and low carbon is being pulled from pillar to post and starting one thing and stopping, and people can't last, to make that change.
But also the cost for the installers of the accreditations they need to deliver grant-funded work. For somebody to deliver work under ECO, it would cost the organisation about £25,000 just to get the accreditations. So when they've done that, they're doing the work, and not all of them are bad. Some of them are really good and do a really good job, and then it's cut. And they've invested also in training staff, and the government has invested in training installers as well. They've had various grant funding schemes for upskilling people, and that just stops. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, wow.
So what is the kind of word on boilers now? Because we do get around, I would say, probably 90% of people that come into NEA with a broken boiler. That's just the hardest thing to try and get at the moment. And it may be like 2.5, 3 grand to give them a new boiler versus probably 15,000 to give them an air source heat pump, solar panels, Is there anything, any provision? Where are we sitting with that now? I've not heard any mention of it all day.
Well, I think eco is the last thing that was providing boilers. I mean, even when Eco4 was introduced, there was quite a lot of backlash about continuing to allow boilers. So that there were quite a lot of sort of pro net zero voices being very critical of government at that time. I think, we've got a couple of DESNES people here. They might want to offer an opinion. So there is, obviously, you've got to think about this in the wider picture is we're still going to have hundreds of thousands of boilers being installed in 5 years' time. So that transition away from boilers is going to be tricky to manage, because if you just say to people trained to do heat pumps, you could then have, apart from all the issues of managing a depleting asset in terms of the gas grid, are you going to have areas like Isle of Wight where you've got no gas engineers and then you're getting them from bloody Sheffield again? So yeah, it's a tricky problem. But in terms of that specific question, I think we could be, yes, in a situation where there is no funding within that retrofit space. There might be some, local funds that can be accessed, but nothing national. Yeah.
Crisis and Resilience Fund that's coming in to replace Household Support Fund mentions boilers in the policy document. So
yeah.
a lot of local authorities are going to give us some money on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's worth a try.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you repeat that louder? Yeah. Oh.
Yes, thank you. Cheers. So I was just saying, Crisis and Resilience Fund, which local authorities can bid into from government, which replaces the Household Support Fund, actually mentions things like appliances and boilers. So if you're going to try and pitch for some money, get your local authority to put into their Crisis and Resilience Fund bid to do some boilers. We're only about 20 a year in each area, and we'll do that on a disposable income model to try and prioritise that to the right people. But it's somewhere for boiler funding to help the most vulnerable.
My name's Kenny Cameron from Connected Response. I've spent the last 7 years installing smart controls in homes with old and new storage heaters to charge them at better times and to charge them according to tomorrow's weather. So the technology works, the engagement we're very good at prior to installation, but the hardest bit, and it links into what Colin from Newcastle Council said, the hardest bit is how do you engage with people that don't want to be engaged with. So we've done a tower block in Newcastle for Colin's team. We've engaged with, let's say, half the population who've come through coffee mornings and have answered the phone and answered the door, but it's getting to the next tranche of people, and more we're coming to the conclusion that it would be better done by third-party, local, trusted intermediaries. Coincidentally, I'm sat beside Paul Rogers from National Energy Action, and we've done a project in North Devon, and Paul, unfortunately for him, lived in Ilfracombe where the project was, so Paul became the third-party intermediary, which was great because he could go into people's houses and answer questions in terms they understood, rather than the manufacturer trying to explain controls and software. So I think the conclusion we've reached over the years is our product is almost incidental. It's how we deliver that product and the service that's much more important. And I think it needs to be done through local third parties.
Yeah, definitely. I can just, chiming in. So when I was mentioning that Energy Champions model that we run, that's exactly that. It's having a point of contact that has this kind of conversations that feels familiar. So it might be the neighbour, I keep looking at Dan with Oldham, but, Dan's colleague, Ibrahim, is the community lead of the Millennium Centre that now is working. Is Ibrahim here?
Yeah. I'm amazed this is the quietest he's ever been.
Give us the way. Well, I'm a fan of Ibrahim and the work that he does. So I don't know, you probably have more to say than me on this, but that kind of very familiar face, very trustworthy. It sounds like you became one of them as well. That makes a really, really big difference, and it is, I was saying earlier, is that idea that everyone needs their own time as well. The idea that you go in, you do something for 6 months, bish, bash, bosh, and you come out. It just doesn't work like that, and some communities might need longer or other things. So, and funding, you were saying 5 years funding, that would be amazing because it can also start to respond to that. Some people are very ready to get on board and go with it, and they have availability, they have privileges that enable them to do that, and others that don't need more time and need that more support.
And it's having that independent person who can stand up for the homeowner or the householder. So they're not from the council, they're not from the installer. They can just advocate on behalf of the householder. So one thing we found was one of the installers was fitting the little Hive mini controls to control people's heatings. Yeah, they're brilliant if you've got a smartphone. But if you don't have a smartphone, you can't program them. And they were fitting them in homes of elderly people. So we were able to go back to the installer and point out that what they'd fitted wasn't fit for purpose because the homeowner couldn't control the heating. So we got them to come back and change them all. So I'm not sure any of the homeowners that we worked with would have pushed as hard as we did to get that change made because, as you say, they were having the work done for free. So there was a feeling that maybe they should just be grateful that they've got us something.
That's a very good point.
And not realise that actually what they were entitled to was the best that could be done. Not just okay, or not just, oh, it might work, or get your son, daughter, grandchild, any other random 14-year-old with a smartphone to come in and do it for you. It needed to be controls that they could control.
And just to the opposite of that, we worked again for a similar project, and we actually worked with existing community groups. So you were saying, sometimes communities that might not reach that advice straight away. And one community group was a women-only, majority Bangladeshi women that would meet together once a week to do all sorts of crafts, but also within that point, talk about the needs and families and things like that. So we built a relationship trust with them, and we said, we're offering energy advice, would you be interested? And then they said yes, but, and then we worked together on tailor that advice. And we went to them when they were already meeting in their space on that day of that week. We asked if we could go, one day of a month of that week, if they were happy to give up their, personal space time for us. And when we did light refreshment, we actually asked them if they had anyone that was already doing sort of a catering business, and they said yes. So we actually got the food that one of the women was already making to bring to that meeting. And we had a translator, and it was again one of the women that was actually doing studying, for being a translator. And so I think those little things can actually make a really, really big difference as well, And then the knowledge and the message that happened in that group with about 15 women, that knowledge was brought into their homes, and they passed it on to, house family members and neighbours. And when we were on other workshops, more people came because they've heard it through that way. So it sounds really small, and you might think, what's the point? It's not going to make a difference. But actually, again, that small is beautiful. That really does have that impact, which I think you probably found it in your situation in a way, isn't it?
Yes, it's a bit like, but if you drop a pebble in a pond, the ripples spread out an awful long way. So you may just impact one person that day, but you don't realise the ongoing impact that one change will make.
So I think on that, that was a positive and very poetic image to end there. Thank you very much for participating, and without Slido or anything else. Thank you very much to our panellists who've particularly fantastic.